unmute Nissa. And so without further ado, I will turn this over to Nissa Tzun of Force Trajectory Project.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I am recording, Michael, but I'm not sure. Okay, it looks like it's on speaker view. Okay, all right, just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you all so much for giving us your attention and your time. You know, Force Trajectory, I'm the co-founder of Force Trajectory Project. My partner, Oja Vincent, and myself, we founded the project back in 2009. And our primary work is working with families who have been impacted by police homicide. We started this project, I was a special needs teacher at the time in Brooklyn, New York, working with some of the most vulnerable populations of the country, you know, Black and brown students who were economically vulnerable and also, you know, living with special needs. And just seeing blatant systemic racism in my face to the point where I knew that I needed to do more, not just be an educator, but I needed to be more involved in community and figure out, you know, how I could assist in this movement against systemic oppression. And so I got involved with anti-racist and anti-war organizations. And in the process of that, a Long Island family, the family of Kenny Lazo, reached out to our organization, which is also a newspaper. They have a nationwide newspaper, community paper that is distributed nationwide. And I'm a photographer, I'm an artist, illustrator, filmmaker. And so I was sent out to Long Island to photograph this family. And in the midst of that, you know, listening to their side of the story, I was flabbergasted. I was just in shock in terms of the story that they had told me. And then when I went home and I Googled Kenny Lazo, the story was completely different. I mean, you know, they criminalized him, labeled him as a drug suspect, said that he tried to grab a police officer's gun, and then he wound up, you know, dead on the precinct floor in the 3rd Precinct, Suffolk County Police Department. You know, the autopsy wasn't released until 6 years after his death. We found that and I apologize for the graphic details, but that's part of the nature of this work. And we do believe that it's important for audience members to understand just how brutal these killings are. So Kenny Lazo nearly bit his tongue off during the struggle. And he was found in his boxer shorts, nothing but his boxer shorts, on the precinct floor with bite marks all over his body. And he was killed by five Suffolk County Police Department plainclothes detectives who all make 6 digits, who are all at the top of the payroll and are union members. And I think one of them is actually the leader of the union in Suffolk County. You know, family got no justice. The grand jury immediately refused to indict the officers. We found out 6 years later that the autopsy report wasn't even shown to the grand jury. And this is typical in police violence cases. So in the midst of doing this work, I was really curious about how, as a visual artist, I could support and uplift impacted family narratives. And so my partner and I met him in the process of creating this project, and found out that he was already doing the oral histories with some of these families. He was already recording, already interviewing people. And so we decided to marry our, you know, gifts of visual art with sound art and design, and create a multimedia project, which is available online at forcetrajectory.com. And so we just started, you know, interviewing more families and meeting more families. And New York being an active city, there were several very vocal veteran activist family members who were already out in the streets for years at that point, leading this movement against police brutality. And so in the course of this work, in 2011, so there's a book called The Stolen Lives Project. It's a project, it's not just a book. And it is the first civilian database of police homicides across the nation. This was the first civilian effort to document these killings. because back in the early 90s, after the Rodney King case that brought a lot of attention to police violence, it was discovered that police departments weren't mandated to report police killings to anyone. And what they were reporting to at the FBI were justifiable homicides yearly with very little details. And so their average of killings were 400 to 600 people per year. But what we found, but what the Stolen Lives Project discovered was that the number of killings is much greater. It's probably three to four times larger than what they were reporting. So anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500, 1,600 people per year are killed by law enforcement, which averages to 3 to 5 people per day. And in the midst of this work also, I discovered the work by Regina Lawrence, who is a longtime PhD and professor. At the time, I think she was at Texas A&M. She wrote a book called The Politics of Force, which encapsulates 10 years of her research on the construction of police brutality narratives in the media. She wanted to know how the media would come up with these stories, how they would construct the narrative, what kind of research they would do or investigative journalism they would do. And what she found was that the majority of these cases, journalists, due to time constraints, due to how corporate journalism is set up, due to editors, editor-in-chiefs having ultimate say in terms of what's printed, what they found was that majority of the time, the authorities are considered the official sources. So, you know, the DA, district attorneys, the police, they're considered official, the official sources of these stories. And so due to time constraints, a lot of the time, journalists just went with the official story, oftentimes without questioning the integrity of the police's narrative, etc. And so as in this machine, this interconnected machine that's happening, what ends up happening often, and I would say at this point, having done this work for so long, 99% of the time, these stories and these police killings are immediately covered up by the mainstream media's regurgitation and amplification of the police narrative. And so what we find in these cases often is when we hear about police shootings, the victim is criminalized, they're immediately demonized, and as a result of that amplification by the media, the larger community has no idea about what happened. In fact, what they think is that police are out there doing their job, cleaning up the streets. And in the meantime, these families live in complete isolation, suffering from the stigma of police violence. A lot of them are suffering in shame, nowhere to turn, and no advocacy, no path to justice, period. So in learning this, you know, we felt that our work was very crucial, knowing that it is a portal to these stories of those directly impacted by police homicide. And so in the last 11 years, that's exactly what we've done, is we've continued our work, most of it being voluntary, most of it on our own dime. Our work was not paid attention to until the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, prompted by the Eric Garner and Michael Brown case in 2014. It was then that we started getting a little bit of support, a little bit of funding, but still to this day, still very much lacking in support. In 2015, I moved to Las Vegas and to pursue my graduate degrees in journalism and master's in social work. And immediately, you know, everywhere I've lived and gone and traveled, I always organize and try to find families because I know they're there. And here in Las Vegas, there were no vocal families at the time that I came here. Not to say that these families haven't been vocal in the past, but at that moment when I went there, there was no movement. And so my work was received very well at UNLV, and they allowed me to do my work and to practice my investigative journalism and to invite interns through the Journalism and Media Studies department to learn how to do this work and contribute to this work. And so through our internship and through the power of the universe and alignment and coincidence, I was able to meet these three families that are on the panel with us today. Mario Wilson, the son of Rex Wilson, who was killed October 13th, 2016. Alma Chavez, the mother of Rafael Olivas, who was killed on July 14th, 2011, and Araya Justin, who was only 6 years old when her father, Joseph Justin, was killed by one of the officers, being Captain Nicole Splinter, who currently oversees police shootings by the LVMPD. Nicole Splinter and Timothy Nikothodis, another police officer who is currently receiving medical benefits from LVMPD, $180,000 a year. And her father was killed, Joseph Justin was killed August 22nd, 2007. And so I wanted to give you all that introduction to this work, and just to give also a little bit of context in regards to what's happening right now as a result of the George Floyd police murder. Rest in peace. This is really a new opportunity that we've never seen in our lifetime, which is an opening and a possibility for directly impacted people to have a space to share their stories, to garner the support of community. And so again, I thank you, Red Rock Democratic Club, for welcoming these families, welcoming our project, and practicing the necessity of deep listening that our community desperately needs. So that's my introduction. Thank you so much. And our speaking panel is going to go in the order of Mario Wilson, the son of Rex Wilson, first, and then we'll move to let's see, I'm sorry, we'll move to Alma Chavez, the mother of Rafael Olivas, and then Araya Justin, the daughter of Joseph Justin. Thank you.
Mario, you're unmuted.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you, Red Rock Democratic Club, for inviting me to speak on the panel this evening. My name is Mario Wilson. I am the oldest child of 9. My father is Rex Wilson, and my mother is Petra Wilson. We're a Native American family and members of the Ogallala Sioux tribe. Both of my parents are from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. My dad was a U.S. Marine, and after his service, my parents relocated us to Henderson, Nevada, with dreams of a good life and with lots of opportunities. Both of my parents were very involved in the community, the school district, coaching, sporting events, Boy Scouts, and church, and active in family gathering events. Family was everything to my dad. And here's a family picture here of all of us. This was the last family photo we were able to get as a family before my dad was murdered in 2016. And here's also a picture of him, his military picture of when he was in the service. On the evening of October 12th, 2016, my father, Rex Wilson, was killed by 4 Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers on the 215 Beltway near North Hualapai Way. After being pursued by 39 patrol vehicles, an illegal pit maneuver was performed. Although my dad's vehicle was stopped, 4 officers, John Squio, Christopher Gowans, Eric Lindbergh, Travis Swartz, exited their vehicles quickly and recklessly and shot my dad 36 times. My father must have known he would not have been getting help that he would be needed, which was apparent in the crosstalk that the media failed to release, and wrote "sorry" in his own blood on the center dash screen prior to dying. My father would have been right. An ambulance wasn't immediately called, and the coroner did not arrive until approximately 6 to 7 hours after this event. As a result, my father was declared deceased in the early morning of October 13th. Within 15 minutes, my dad was not identified initially and was listed as a John Doe until my family made the connection that my dad was possibly the one who was killed after seeing the breaking local news, and after my mom filed a missing persons report, and she later identified him by giving a description of his tattoos to the coroner's office. Within 15 minutes of this information, 2 Las Vegas Metro detectives showed up to my mother's house and performed an interrogation on my newly grieving mother. They had told my mother that they were exhausted after working 72 hours on a case and asked for permission to record their conversation with my mother and said it would be for their use only. My mother shared with them that she filed a missing persons report on October 11th after she had not seen my father after 2 days. During this conversation, my mother shared personal details regarding my father, such as being estranged, his addiction, substance abuse, and gambling issues. After this, the police and local media used and shared these personal and intimate details to dehumanize my father's character and image, and used the interrogation details from my mother, as these were private matters not shared with anyone else. In addition, the police and local news brought forth previous petty charges such as illegal fishing and simple assault and battery, which was the last known crimes committed almost 30 years prior to further dehumanize him. What they left out was that following these charges, my father became a U.S. Marine, maintained sobriety for over 20 years, and was a successful businessman in the community. My father was accused of being involved in alleged robberies throughout the Las Vegas Valley and was never able to have a fair trial because the police made the decision to be his executioners on his final day on earth. My father was more than an accused suspect. He did have many struggles, and during his final days, even months of his life, it was evident that he was having a mental breakdown. My father needed help, not death. I think it's also important to include the fact that 2 of the officers involved in my father's shooting were previously involved in an officer-involved shooting a year prior in 2015. These 2 officers remained partners and in the same squad, and were the ones who performed the illegal pit maneuver on my father's vehicle. To my knowledge, although they did not follow the LVMPD policy, no disciplinary action had been made. LVMPD claims that their murderous actions are justified because they allegedly saw a gun pointed at them. During the crime scene, however, it was discovered that there was only a spray nozzle inside the vehicle. They could not provide any clear or concise evidence aside from an extremely distorted photo in which they decided to put my father's life on the line. Their own recklessness was displayed on their body cameras when they announced to watch their own crossfire before engaging my father and surrounding him. It was apparent that there was no skillful strategy to detain my father among the 39 patrol vehicles that pursued my father, and this resulted in an unnecessary murder and use of excessive force. Following my father's death, my family was given no direction on how to seek help, understand, or compassion. We felt alienated from our home and community. It wasn't until I was introduced to Nissa with the Forced Trajectory Project by a good friend, whose work helps bring awareness to families impacted by police brutality and state-sponsored violence, and an offering of support. My family has suffered mentally and emotionally due to this traumatic event. We have had to seek counseling and therapy to deal with the trauma. In addition, my father was the sole provider for the family, and we are still dealing with the financial devastation after his death, and we are still trying to save our family home from loss. We are also missing out on several milestones and events without my father. Just recently, this year, my fiance gave birth to what would have been his first grandchild. My youngest sibling, Elijah, graduated high school, which my father was also not to be able to be present for. He will miss out on future weddings, college graduations, birth of grandchildren, and so much more. Lastly, I would also like for it to be known that my family had no previous run-ins with the police. In fact, my father supported me in my own quest to become an officer with the LVMPD in 2015. But I was later disqualified from being a candidate after failing the polygraph lie detector test regarding a drug use question. Although I had never used drugs and was subject to random drug screenings, as I had worked for the federal government for 7 years prior. With this all being said, my family is still seeking justice for my father's murder. We demand to see more police accountability for the officers who performed an illegal pit maneuver against my father's vehicle and outside their own use of force policy. We demand that there be repercussions for officers who are involved in multiple killings, such as the 2 involved in my father's case. We demand to eradicate the shoot-to-kill mentality that police officers have. We demand increased mental health training. We demand that the policy academy be longer than 6 months, as it is a fact that other countries train for years and have statistically less brutality in officer-involved killings. We demand that police suspend the use of paid administrative leave for cops under investigation. We demand to see qualified immunity abolished and require that cops be liable for misconduct in settlements. And we demand to see a neutral, independent, and perhaps even non-governmental investigation be performed for anyone killed by the police. Lastly, while it is known that people of color are being targeted and killed exponentially by the police, Native Americans are still killed at a much higher and disproportionate rate than any other racial group. Police brutality, especially killings, are also underreported because officers visually assess one's race, and Native Americans are often mistaken for Black, white, or Hispanic. And the media and police also advised that my father was white and Hispanic initially. In Native American culture, we believe that all life is sacred. Going forward, we would like to see all lives considered in this respect by everyone, including but especially our own government, who has sworn to serve and protect our communities. Thank you again for allowing me to speak tonight.
So thank you, Mario, for sharing your story and also your demands. Before we start with move on to Alma Chavez, I wanted to mention and just give some context to police violence here in Nevada State. So just focusing on Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, there have been over 550 cases of police homicides in the last 30 years, with not one on-duty officer prosecuted, not one. So there was an off-duty officer that was prosecuted, but it's a very strange case because he's serving life in prison, which is very unusual for a law enforcement agent. So it makes all of us question the integrity of that investigation. But in regards to all of the 550 cases, not one has been prosecuted. So we do have to look at the role of the district attorney and the fact that the current one has let well over 40 cases of police homicides go under his nose without any prosecution. And then nationwide, and how that looks nationwide, is that conviction rates for police homicides is less than 0.5%, which means that 99.5% of these killings, the killers go free without a slap on the wrist, without any kind of prosecution. So I wanted to give that context to you all. And then the last piece of information I want to share with you all is that over 51% of those killed by police are suffering from some kind of mental illness or disability. And so this is really a number that's shocking and really should bring attention to the community in regards to solutions, that there have to be solutions for those who are most vulnerable in our community, including the mentally ill. So with that, I wanted to introduce Alma Chavez. She is the mother of Rafael Olivas, who was killed on July 14th, 2011. Thank you.
Let me see. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing the story that I live, and I hope it's going to be helpful for, a lot of people to understand what we are going through. My name is Alma Chavez. I'm being resident of Las Vegas, Nevada for 30 years. I'm the mother of 4 kids, but today I would like to talk to you about my son, Rafael Olivas, who born March 22, 1988. I carried him for 9 months and I raised him for 23 years. During those years, I received hundreds of satisfactions. My son was a loving kid. He was very smart, hard worker, full of talents, and very handsome. He never got in trouble. He was never part of any gang or drug addiction, like he was described before by Metro. My family and myself went through a difficult time around 2011. Ralphie was sick. He was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. It's a disease in the intestines. Not curable. It caused terrible pain, bleeding. And obviously, with the recession, we lost our house, he lost his job. So we were going through a lot of emotional stress. At the time of Ralphie's last day, July 2011, my son was going through so much, as I said before. I was trying to seek for help, trying to get information to help him to see what I could do to make the situation better. I'm a county worker, and I know I work back in the days close to people, community. And I seek for an advice to be able to help my son. So the lady asked me to call 911 when Ralphie, could have any episode, and request for the police assistance to take him and have an evaluation. I refused to do that because I told them that my son was not a criminal, he was a good kid, and I didn't even want a criminal record for him. My co-worker from the state told me, call CIT. CIT is a crisis intervention team police that is trained to deal with these kind of situations, with this kind of emotional situations. They're going to take him, they're going to perform an evaluation, and your son is going to be okay, and no record is going to be left for him. In July 14, 2011, my son had an argument with a close friend who back in the days was living with us. When I hear him arguing, screaming, I tried to go and de-escalate the situation, and I was not successful. Then I got desperate and I decided to call 911 and request for the CIT team. When I called, I specifically requested for the crisis intervention team. I told them that my son was not diagnosed with any mental illness, but I told them that he was having, a mental breakdown at the moment, and I needed them help. When my son found out that I was calling the police, he got more upset and started venting to me what he would do if the police would show. He say things that he shouldn't say, but I'm going to tell you that he is not the first person who say things when he's upset, things that they don't mean, things that they don't do. So many times, and I'm pretty sure that everybody in the audience had a moment in the one said, I hate you, or I wish you were dead, I wish I could kill you, but you don't really mean it. You just say it. You just vent, you take out your frustration. That was a discussion between my son and myself. My son got a knife and walked outside. I was with the operators. I never hung up the call. And I advised them that my son walked out with a knife. And I told them that I was afraid that he could hurt himself. And I told them several times that my son was not going to hurt anyone. I told them that my son was a good kid. And I asked them to please don't hurt my baby. After a few minutes, I noticed the car police turning to our street while my son, Ralphie, was walking on the sidewalk. He was hit once with a rubber bullet, forcing him to go to the middle of the street. Then he was hit more times when he stopped. I was super surprised. This is not the reason why I called. I was not expecting the police to come and shut my son without even trying to talk to him, trying to de-escalate the situation, trying to find out what his problem was, or trying to see if he was secure or nothing. They came upset because what he said before. He said that he was going to fight the cops. He said that was going to fight the cops, and that's the reason why they were very upset with him. I was not even able to react after the gun, the rubber bullet shots. In a matter of seconds, my son was killed. 3 officers were in the front, 17 per record were in the back. My son was only 115 pounds. They say that my son was wielding the knife. That's a lie. I have a video to prove that my son was only walking. My son was hit in the chest, the lungs, the stomach, the arm. He was handcuffed to the back, even if his left arm was totally loose because was destroyed by one of the bullets. He was choking with his own blood, unable to breathe, and no one helped him. They handcuffed him, punched him in the face, and left him there to bleed. When they called the paramedics, according to the statements, to me it was an eternity. They say that they called them immediately. But when the paramedics came, they took the paramedics far away from my son for minutes. Minutes that could have done the difference between life and death. After, they shot my son. Obviously, as a mother, I ran towards to my baby. I almost get shot, but I was stopped by one of the cops very close to my son. I could see how he was struggling there, trying to turn his body to the side a little bit to be able to breathe. And I saw him taking his last breath. After that, I was deprived of my freedom for hours. They took me to the hospital. They told me that my son was alive, even if in my heart I knew my son died at the scene because I saw him taking his last breath. They destroyed the image of my son. They say that my son was an illegal Mexican gang, drug addicted, danger person who put them in danger, and they had to kill. My son was a citizen. He's never been involved in gangs, and he was not drug addicted. They performed a test. Everything came as I expected. He was clean. He had a little bit of alcohol that was informed to the cops before their arrival. They're very good to put the stories together. They're experts. We are not. There's no investigation performed to any of the people involved in the shooting. There were 3 cops involved in my son's shooting. One was a CIT specialist person who's supposed to take control of the situation of the event. He didn't. He allowed another of his co-workers who was personal friend to take over and make the decision to kill my son. They killed him in less than 3 minutes after they turned my street. They say that they gave several commands to my son to drop the knife. And I can tell you, they know, as I know, my son didn't even have the knife with him at the moment they encountered him. I didn't see him. I was very close to him, and I have a statement from the neighbor in front of where my son was killed, who was on the second floor, who is a person with knowledge of arms, who described exactly what kind of arms the cops were using, what caliber, what color, which position, where I was, everything, and he made a draw of that. And he said that he never saw the knife either. I was from one point of view, he was from another one. I know my son didn't even have that. In the autopsy report, was revealed that my son had defensive wounds. Somebody who puts in danger another person doesn't have defensive wounds. All justice was denied to me in Vegas. The DA ruled out the case in police favor. The judge denied me the right to go to trial. No one took my statement as the primary witness. They tried to deny that I was even present at the moment of my son's being killed. I was there. I saw everything that happened. No one can come and tell me that my son was a danger to them, because he was not. He needed help. I called for help. I didn't call for anybody to come and kill my son, because he was not putting anybody in danger. While he was outside, he crossed some neighbors. They didn't even notice he had a knife. They never felt intimidated. They wrote letters to me, statements, telling to whoever can hear that my son was a good kid and he never, never, never intimidated them. I would like to make a call tonight for several changes in our country. I would like my case to be reopened and really investigated, because the DA didn't even investigate my case. My case was swept under the rug because he had so many cases and he didn't have the time to do it. The judge based his decision in the police statements, not in what really happened. I took the case to the Ninth Circuit, and in the Ninth Circuit, 3 judges ruled the case in favor of the police department, but they say that the reason why they were ruling in their favor was because the law is not clear and how the cops supposed to act when they encounter people with mental illness. So we need clear laws, because I don't want anybody to go through the pain that I'm been going through. You have no idea how my life has been after those 9 years. I feel guilty for calling the cops. I feel guilty for my baby's mother. And I know that, if Joshua Hutchin would have done his job as a CIT, maybe my son would be alive. Christopher Grievous, who was the person who decided to shoot my son in the beginning, had history already. He had a previous incident in the one he left somebody in wheelchairs. 10 months after the kill of my son, he killed a teacher for kids with special necessities. And he said the same statements. I was afraid for my life. He was in company of other 4 cops. They exchanged high fives after they killed the lady. Her name is Charmel. I cannot recall the last name. I'm so sorry. But Charmel Edwards was her name. 10 months after, I would like to know how many more reports or incidents he has. My son was wrongly killed. He had no chance. He was a good kid. He just needed help. He just had a bad day, and I just cannot believe for having a bad day, he had to pay with his life. And I have to pay with mine because I made a call, because I trusted the system. And I trusted the system because I work for the system. I work for the county, and my mission is help families. But some of the cops are not there to do them job. We can see certain pattern in certain cops. They enjoy killing, and they always justify what they do. They're experts. They get together. They put stories together. They destroy the person that they killed, the image, to justify what they did. My son didn't have any record. He didn't even have a traffic ticket. I'm not saying that a person who has bad record deserves to die, because everyone, and I said everyone, deserves to go to and have justice and be judged for whatever they did, but no one has the right to take them life. So my mission is to take out from the streets those killers with license who always come clean, justified. We need a change. We need a reform. One of the changes that I would like to see in my case is I would like to reopen my case and have a private investigation, not an investigation from Metro. I'm demanding, it's not that I would like, I'm demanding for Metro to return my baby's clothes and shoes. I don't understand why they refuse to give that to me. It belongs to me. I would like to see cops that kill people wrongly spend time in jail. I demand changes in the policies and procedures for police departments. We need transparency, accountability for their actions. We need to remove the immunity of protection to police departments. Nobody should have the license to kill. Nobody. I would like to see federal investigations to all cops that have been involved in shootings in the past. Not only the ones in the future are going to be involved, because there's so much injustice in the past, and I would like to see that happening, so at least we can have a little peace of mind. I would like to see police receiving real training and mental evaluation. I would like to see perform a federal investigation to all DAs and any other government authority who have been protecting all the assassins that works for police departments. We would like to, I would like also to be able to see the records of all police who have been involved in any kind of misconduct. That should be public record. They work for us. They're supposed to protect us. They receive so many benefits that I think that should be removed. This was my baby. This is Ralphie. I would like to tell you that my life was destroyed 9 years ago. I'm still working because I have to fight for Ralphie and be sane and do good for other kids. And I'll continue fighting to make a change because I know in the department are good people and the police department are good people. But I'm making a call to all these good people to stand up and make a change. Get rid of the bad apples. Show us that you care about us. Stand up for us. Don't cover for killers anymore. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alma. One of the things that we like to do, and I'll just do it because I know that everybody's muted, after a loved one, a family member speaks, is to say their name. And so I'll do that for Rex Wilson and also for Rafael Olivas. So if you guys want to, do it with me, you can do that in your privacy of your own homes, muted. So say his name. We'll do it 3 times for each person. Say his name, Rex Wilson. Say his name, Rex Wilson. Say his name, Rex Wilson. And then for Rafael Olivas, say his name, Rafael Olivas. Say his name, Rafael Olivas. Say his name, Rafael Olivas. Thank you, Alma, for sharing. Your testimony always brings me to tears. So before I introduce Araya, I wanted to touch base on some things that she mentioned, which is the issue of the police secrecy that has plagued our nation for decades. In the 70s, the Peace Officer Bill of Rights was adopted, and it has spread across this country. As you guys know, that policing is a local and state. It's organized by local and state governments. So the Peace Officer Bill of Rights is a piece of legislation that allows for police records of misconduct to be private, to be sealed. And the only way that we can get these public records is to go to court and basically go to battle with police unions. So very important to understand this. This is one of I think should be a federal demand that the Peace Officer Bill of Rights be dismantled. The part of the reason why these incidents happen so often is because these officers who continue to violate the civil and human rights of our citizens and our residents in this nation, there's no consequences, right? And so oftentimes, if a case does not make any kind of national news or even local news, these cops just take their paid leave and then they come right back on, and they're right back on the force with their badge and gun. And that's exactly what happened in the case of Rafael Olivas and Charmel Edwards. Charmel Edwards is the woman who, she was, I think, 49 years old, special needs teacher and social worker who was killed 10 months after Rafael Olivas. And in that case, it's very similar. Her 2 young daughters, who were just teenagers, were overwhelmed with the killing of their mother, had zero ability to defend for their mother's case at that young age, and witnesses' statements were contradictory towards contradicting the police depositions, which was that she was armed and that she was pointing her gun at the police. And again, no criminal record, etc. And another officer involved in her shooting was also responsible for shooting a disabled man in 2006, who they said that they believed he was armed and he was unarmed, and he was a disabled man. So that's just another case. So I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that the Peace Officer Bill of Rights is a real obstacle for police prosecution and for for prosecuting killer cops and putting them in a situation where they can kill and kill again. So with that, I want to introduce Araya Justin. She is the daughter of Joseph Justin, who was killed on August 22nd, 2007.
Hi. I'd first like to start off by thanking you guys for giving us a platform and listening to us as we tell the truth about our loved ones. I'd like to apologize in advance. I get emotional every time I talk about my dad, so if I start crying, please bear with me. My grandma moved her and her family from Michigan to Nevada whenever my dad was just a teenager. And during the first couple months of being here, my dad had stolen a couple candy bars from a corner store. And when the officer brought him back home, he told my grandma that one day he would be bringing my dad home in a body bag. And that's exactly what happened on August 22nd, 2007. Here's a couple of pictures of my dad and me. He was the best dad I could ever ask for. So on August 22nd, 2007, my dad was a suspect in a robbery, and he had gotten out of his van and started running. And it came to a point where the officers had said that he had a gun and pointed it at one of the officers, but no witnesses said that they saw a gun. When the reporters arrived at the scene afterwards, they talked to the reporters and no one had seen a gun, and there was no gun found on my dad afterwards. My dad was shot in his back and in the back of his leg, and the whole interaction lasted 45 seconds. So in a matter of 45 seconds, my dad was gone. My life was ruined, and my little sister's life. She was born into trauma because she wasn't even born yet. The officers now, one being Captain Nicole Splinter, who is, she's oversight of all officer-involved shootings. So she basically got a promotion after killing my dad. And the other officer, Timothy Nicothodes, went on in Montana. He was going more than twice the posted speed limit with a blood alcohol percent of 0.219, so triple the limit. He got into an accident and critically injured a 19-year-old girl, and he walked away from that. He signed a deal with Metro, an under-the-table deal to get medical retirement for over $180,000 a year. After my dad was killed, I was just 6 years old, so I was just starting first grade. I got bullied a lot in elementary school because the media portrayed my dad to be a criminal. The kids would run around the playground saying, oh, her dad died because he was a criminal. He did bad stuff, so that means she does bad stuff. My grandma wanted to have my dad's services at a church that she attended, and they turned her away and said he did not deserve to have church services because he was a criminal. My little sister was born just 4 months after my dad was killed. So she only knows him through the stories that we tell her and the pictures that we show her. She'll never know what his voice sounded like when he told you that he loved you. And she'll never know what his hugs felt like whenever he wanted you to know how much he loved you. She actually wrote something at a meeting, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Just a part of it. She's 12 years old now. She said, seeing my friends with their mom and dad brings anger and sadness to my heart. because I don't have a dad to wish Happy Father's Day to in person. I have to look up and say it when he should be here, right by my side, cheering for me at my soccer games and award ceremonies. But I have to think he is cheering for me up there. Those officers took a chunk of my heart and shattered it to pieces. And just recently, we had a press conference here in Vegas for Families Are the Front Line on June 6th, and that was the first time I publicly spoke out about my dad. And a couple days later, me and my family went to a Nike store at the mall where they have officers that are there on overtime, where they stand at the door and make sure that everything is okay. And we've been there so many times before, and the officers just stand at the front and make sure that everything's okay. But the second we got in line, they stared us down as we were outside of the store. And when we got inside of the store, they followed us around and wouldn't leave us alone until we left. My family still has a lot of unanswered questions. My dad's case was closed the second the coroner's inquest was over. The officers were found to be acting within reason, and that was the end of it. No witnesses were willing to testify during the coroner's inquest. And that brings me to some of my demands that I have for my family. I want witnesses to be questioned by a separate party other than the police, because at the scene, all the witnesses told the reporters that they did not see a gun, and then they were questioned by the police, and when it came time to testify during the coroner's inquest, no one was willing to speak up. I want Officer Nicole Splinter to step down from her position. Me and my family do not feel safe in a community where the person that murdered my dad is walking free and part of the people that are supposed to protect and serve us. I want Timothy Nicothotes, the other officer involved, to no longer receive his medical retirement of $180,000 a year. And we also want my dad's belongings back. It has been almost 13 years, and the only thing we've gotten was his driver's license. We don't have his clothes, we don't have his wallet, we don't have any jewelry that he was wearing. And lastly, we want support. My family was shunned by our friends and other family members when my dad was killed. We were afraid to speak out because of the exact reason that has been happening, which is officer intimidation. They don't want us speaking out because they know that they did wrong, but I want them to know that I will not stop speaking out until my dad has justice, which I don't exactly know what justice is because he's never gonna come back. But I'm gonna fight to get as close as possible to that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Araya. So let's do the say his name ritual 3 times again. Joseph Justin is his name. Say his name, Joseph Justin. Say his name, Joseph Justin. Say his name, Joseph Justin. So before we break into Q&A, and it looks like we have are ending early, so that's great. So we have some extra time to engage with you folks with your questions. I wanted to go over some collective demands that we've been talking about. We are organizing to create a cohesive set list of demands for local cases and also statewide and federal. So the one that you've all heard before, which is to return loved ones' belongings to the family. This has been an issue with several of our impacted families. Last fall, or it might have been earlier this spring, I can't remember, one of the police officers in an upper management position was able to return Rafael Olivas' keychain to Alma Chavez. But when it came to his clothes and his shoes, several excuses were given. And after asking several times, the reasons changed time after time. So There is no reason why a loved one's belongings are still with and stuck in an evidence locker somewhere. We have had cases where loved ones' belongings have been returned. So it just doesn't make sense that some families are being denied their loved ones' things. Another demand is to end qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is basically kind of like a get out of jail free card for police officers. This has, Colorado recently just ended qualified immunity in Colorado. So I do believe that's something that we can do as well and demand. Another demand is to dismantle the Peace Officer Bill of Rights so that police officer records can be made public, and that we as a public can see who we are hiring and why we're hiring them and what kind of record they have, including police officers that are in high up positions like Captain Nicole Splinter. We are also demanding independent criminal investigations on all police homicides in the last 30 years. We are demanding the demilitarization of the LVMPD. There's no reason for them to have machines of war, available to them to utilize on citizens. Another demand is to defund the LVMPD and reinvest in local communities, in especially mental health supports and education, both areas that Nevada is severely lacking in support. And then also to redirect first response, meaning that not every emergency requires a police officer at the scene. Maybe it's sending social workers to the scene to help de-escalate situations so that, our mentally ill and disabled people are protected, since they are one of the most vulnerable populations. Resignation of Captain Nicole Splinter and any other high up officer that has a record of violating civilian and human rights. Investigation of the DA's office in regards to their decisions on police homicide cases. And then lastly, and we will probably have a more cohesive list of demands later as we organize state compensation and services for all impacted families and survivors of police violence. So those are our current list of demands, and I can also make them available to you all at a later time in an email of some sort. At this time, I guess we can continue, or we can open up for question and answer. And
Nissa, before you do, if you could just go ahead and stop recording.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay.